Jake Cherry and Brian Allison. And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Injuries can happen when you least expect it. For over 40 years, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide what happened and who's at fault. More at waynehogan.law.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
It's the biggest stories from the week. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, we'll look back at the week's top stories with our Friday Roundtable as the Jaguars unveil what they call the Stadium of the Future. More controversy surrounding the death of a local inmate, and apartments are going up everywhere, but where are the workers to build them? All of those stories ahead, and then later in the hour, how Downtown Vision Inc. is working on placemaking and what that means for the urban core. Lots to discuss, so keep listening. Our fabulous foursome is on deck and ready to chat, and it's all coming your way right after this news.
It's a minute after 9 o'clock. This is WJCT News 89.9, Jacksonville. Moving the Duval County Jail will be a priority, according to Jacksonville City Council member Ron Salem, who will be leading as council president come July. The jail is on riverfront adjacent property downtown next to nightlife and across from luxury apartments. According to a report from Jacksonville Daily Record, a couple of potential locations for the new jail have been suggested, but the city has not explored those options in depth. The cost of an eventual move would depend on the new location. Mayor-elect Donna Deegan has acknowledged that while the jail is no longer large enough for the city's needs, a new one would not be a first-year priority. Jacksonville University's College of Law received a multi-million-dollar gift yesterday from the founder of a Jacksonville-based investment firm. The endowment is in honor of the late Randall C. Berg, Jr., whose legacy helped fund legal services for the poor in Florida and beyond. It was presented by his brother, local investor Gilchrist Berg, to JU Law Dean Nicholas Allard. Allard says it is a profoundly humbling and inspiring endowment to the fledgling law school.
It's emblematic of the enormous support that we've gotten from the bench, the bar, and the community. And it's emblematic of the kind of support that means that success is our only option. So I feel a big responsibility to live up to the high expectations, which I think we're doing.
The Berg Deanship will provide funding for JU College of Law's faculty and student research, symposiums, and scholarships. And we have rain and thunderstorms in the forecast for today, especially this afternoon. It's clouding up now with temperatures in the upper 70s. We'll get to 91 degrees this afternoon.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
The Jaguars unveil the Stadium of the Future. More controversy surrounding a Duval County jail death. And apartments are going up all over town. Landmarks are coming down. But where are the workers to build all this housing? Some of the stories making headlines this week. Good Friday morning. We're live with you from Studio 2. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead, all of the top stories of the week with our Friday Roundtable, and you can join us. The line is 549-2937. Call us up. Then later, how Downtown Vision Inc. is working on placemaking to further improve the city's urban core. That's later. But first, it's Friday, and here to round up all of the week's news, we welcome Will Brown of our own Jax Today. Hi, Will.
Good morning, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Ben Becker from Action News Jax. Hey, Ben.
Melissa, glad to be on the show of the future.
Yeah, that's right. Alexandria Mansfield of the Florida Times-Union. Good to have you.
Good morning.
And rounding out our fabulous foursome, Tim Gibbons of the Jacksonville Business Journal.
Good to be here.
So good to have all four of you here. Folks, listen live to our panel on the radio right now, or you can watch them on our video stream. It's up now on Facebook and YouTube. Again, the number to call in, 549-2937. Let's begin with our top story. The Jacksonville Jaguars have unveiled new renderings. Yes, more renderings for us to look at, everyone, for what they call the Stadium of the Future, a big renovation project they say will transform downtown. Now, the Jaguars say the plan, which you can look at firstdowntownjacksonville.com, will secure NFL football in Northeast Florida well into the future. The design announcement made no mention of the total cost of this cool new stadium, but Jaguars president Mark Lamping says it could come to $1.3 to $1.4 billion. That's billion with a B. The Jaguars want to split the cost of this project 50-50 with the city. Big question, of course, how will the city pay that tab? We begin the hour with a closer look, and let us know your thoughts about the Jaguars' new plans for their stadium and everything that goes with that. 549-2937. Give us a call. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. Facebook always open. Will Brown, let's begin with you. These renderings look amazing. The vision is something fans will love. Of course, the devil is always in the details and how we will all pay for this. Your thoughts?
That is a big rendering. It's a smaller stadium. The capacity for Jaguars games would be 62,000, which is less than its current capacity. Then again, the stadium is usually not always filled unless the Jaguars are winning. But as for the stadium itself, that's going to be a big expense. And, Mayor-elect Deegan has vowed not to raise property taxes to pay for this. So how it will be paid is anyone's guess right now. I think one of the challenges that Jacksonville has compared to some of the other NFL markets that have released renderings or started renovations or have plans for new stadiums is there's not going to be any state funding. The state has made pretty clear that they're not chipping in for stadium things. And I want to say it was last year or 2021 that Governor DeSantis vetoed some financing for the Tampa Bay Rays, and it wasn't related to their stadium. It was just related to, I think it was about $35 million. So that's $35 million that the governor vetoed. I can only imagine that the state is going to have less interest in spending far more than that here in Jacksonville.
549-2937. Now, the big change in the new design the Jaguars showed us this week, it features a big shade canopy so that it won't be as hot to sit in the stadium during warm weather. At the same time, let's talk about where the public might be on this. Ben Becker, a UNF poll shows that while the majority of Jacksons want the team to stay, and 89% say it should be renovated, 80% of them also say the city shouldn't pay for any of it. So how do you square that circle?
Well, first off, let's clear up some misunderstandings. First off, there was a non-binding memo of understanding agreed upon between the Jags and the city on May the 10th, which ironically was one day before Mayor Lenny Curry did his radio tour talking about some of this stuff. Now, that being said, the stadium cost would be about, again, that 1.3, 1.4 billion. However, it is not a 50-50 split, Melissa. It is the city picking up 66%, two-thirds of that cost. The 50-50 split is if you include the Lot J 2.0 that's part of this proposal. If you add that into this, then you're talking about a $2 billion project where the city's on the hook for about $1 billion of it. So if we're talking strictly the stadium, the city's picking up 2/3 of that cost. So that's one thing I want to clear up for everybody. Secondly, in this memo of understanding that was laid out, there is a mechanism that is in there that the Jags are seeking to help pay for this. It's called a special taxing district. And what that means is money that's spent in that area around the stadium would go back into the project to pay for it. So on the surface, you say, okay, great, it pays for itself. However, if you talk to economists about it, part of the problem with this type of mechanism is that normally when I or you or anybody else go around town and we spend money, it goes into the general fund. The money, the taxes, that goes towards the general fund, and that gets funneled towards things like police, fire, and services that we need. When there's a special taxing district, all that money is funded towards that specific area. So when you're taking 70,000 people or 60,000 people, and all of a sudden they're spending all that money in the special taxing district, it's basically cannibalizing money that normally would go to the general fund, and it's now going towards this special taxing district to help prop up the stadium. So while it's paying for the stadium on one hand, it's now money that's not going to the general fund on the other hand. So that's another thing I wanted to point out. Thirdly, one way to help try to make this more equitable for everybody, and I talked to somebody who's a pretty smart person, and he said, well, why not create a ticket tax? You know, Joe on the west side, who doesn't go to Jags games and certainly can't afford tickets, shouldn't be paying the freight necessarily, or as much of the freight. But if you put a ticket tax on these tickets, and I'm not talking about a $1 surcharge here, I'm talking about $10, $20 surcharge, the people who go to the games will be the ones who help pay for some of this.
Yeah, and there have been other suggestions. You know, go the Green Bay Packers model. Let fans buy shares, sell seats in the stadium. We've heard a lot of that. Let me ask you, Alexandria Mansfield. You cover growth and development for the city. What about the team saying that this will help develop around the city, especially at the historic East Side, which is an underserved neighborhood? The Jaguars are saying they're going to donate $5 million to help the University of Florida bring their graduate campus to Jacksonville on the adjacent Jacksonville Fairgrounds property. So there are lots of development arguments that the team is making here.
Yeah, and those are definitely something to take into account. I tweeted earlier that as a Swiftie, I'm hopeful a renovation would mean we're that much closer to being listed as a stop on her next tour, which obviously brings in a ton of money to any city that she stops in. But in all seriousness, I think that the issue is just going to come down to money for Jacksonville and how much taxpayers should put in for this project. And I think this is, like a first offer in a negotiation. So I don't think we're close to closing anything yet, but we'll have to see what comes next.
Well, here's the statement from Mayor-elect Donna Deegan. She called the stadium plans, quote, a beautiful vision for economic revitalization. She goes on to say, I look forward to the coming negotiations and a deal that is good for taxpayers, which keeps the Jaguars in Jacksonville for generations to come. Tim Gibbons, the Jaguars team says they're going to host what they call huddle-up events, basically town halls where people can learn more about these plans. And what about how the city will handle the negotiations?
So that is the big question. So I was talking to the mayor-elect yesterday, and she said that one of the main things in her conversations with the team earlier was that she really wanted to have those community conversations. There's going to be, I think, 14 of them over the next 10 days or so. It's a hard sell. I mean, the idea that, as that poll you cited said, people don't want to pony up a bunch of money for it. On the other hand, no one is going to be the politician who loses the Jaguars. So yeah, I know you've had callers who call in here and say, well, the city should take a hard line of, we'll walk if, that's not going to happen. So the city is in not the best negotiating posture. Apparently there are already law firms and others reaching out to the Deegan transition team to offer their services. I assume an RFP will be going out on that sometime soon.
Not local firms.
Just firms in general. I
don't firms that specialize in this kind of negotiation.
Exactly.
Will Brown.
Tim's exactly right. I did want to go back to, because I had a chance to listen to Mark Lamping earlier this week, and we were discussing MOUs, and the thing that really comes to my mind is he used the word split. Now, whether how accurate that is remains to be seen. But having looked at the MOU between the May 24th MOU between I shouldn't say between the city and the club, but the biggest thing is yes, there's some ancillary things besides the stadium, but we wanted to really pin him down on specifically how much the stadium costs. And yes, there is a special taxing district that's been proposed, but how some of those things that are outside the stadium are very much contingencies. Yes, the Jags are hopeful that UF might choose to get to have its graduate campus on the fairgrounds property, but I think it was last night that that UF project was listed as one of the biggest turkeys in the state. So who knows whether Governor DeSantis even signs off on the state funding for that project. So there are a lot of contingencies for things outside of the stadium that, Lamping himself said would be part of negotiation. I did also want to mention that, these huddles are a lesson that the team learned from its Lot J experience. Lamping himself over the years has said that the team, one of the reasons why they created firstdowntownjacksonville.com was because, the public told them the team needed to be more transparent and more open with them about their development plans. So, if there's something good that came out of the Lot J experience, is that the Jaguars are going into the community more than they were 2 and 3, 4 years ago about their development plans.
All right, folks, let us know your thoughts. 549-2937. Dave in Nassau County. Hello, Dave. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. I have a quick question. Who's going to get the revenue from the various events that are not NFL related? Is that going to go to Shad Khan, or is it going to go to the city, or to whom? And I'll take your response off the air. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk about that. And by the way, that's a caller from Nassau County. Ben Becker, here's an email from a listener. Surrounding counties should help pay for the stadium. This is a regional asset. Go ahead, Ben.
I'd be surprised if that was to happen. But I'm sure whether the city would reach out to those entities remains to be seen. But I don't see if I'm St. John's or Nassau or Baker, any of those counties saying, okay, raising their hand and saying, we're going to contribute to this. But, it remains to be seen. The one caller did mention the revenue split, and that's a great call. So as I mentioned before, the city's picking up 66-67% of the stadium, and then will be about, I think, 14% of this Lot J 2.0 if this was to come to pass. What is the revenue split for the city? And I would seriously doubt it's going to be the city gets 2/3 of the revenue from the stadium and gets the revenues split from Lot J 2.0 in that as it's constituted. I don't think the city, based on previous experience, is speaking to economists, they're not going to get 50% of the revenue. They're not going to get 33% of the revenue. It's going to be a minuscule amount of the revenue. And the way it pays for itself, again, is going to be through the special taxing district, which I explained before, which is the problematic parts of it. At the end of the day, there is the hard question of the millage rate. And that would have to be raised, according to some people I've talked to. Right now, it just does not generate enough revenue to be able to pay off some of the debt service that would be necessary. And those are going to be some of the hard decisions that the Deegan administration will have to look at. And also find it interesting how, and I like an answer to this at some point, why the current administration felt it was necessary to cut a deal with the Jaguars on May the 10th, just a week before the election, which in effect boxes in down to Deegan, but also would have boxed in Daniel Davis as well if he would have won. So now you have a new administration coming in with a negotiated plan, although it's non-binding, that now there's a framework set that they have nothing to do with. So I'm sure that's causing some consternation as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alexandria. The timing of this has, let's say, drawn some interest. Why is the Curry administration negotiating this just as they're leaving? What was the thinking that went into that?
Yeah, I wish I knew. With Deegan taking office so soon, it's definitely going to be tough to try to approve a budget with this on the table now. And I'm assuming she didn't have much say in anything. I'm assuming it wasn't like she and Curry were working together beforehand to try to work this out behind the scenes or anything like that. So I definitely think it's going to be something tough that she's going to have to deal with on day one.
But as Ben pointed out, Tim, the Curry folks probably were pretty confident that Daniel Davis was going to be the next mayor going into election night. So this would have been his headache to deal with, too, if he had won.
True, and now the Curry and Davis campaigns were closer than obviously the Curry and Deegan campaign. Deegan will say that she's not put in a box, and the idea that the MOU is not binding, that this is just a starting point, and a lot of those negotiating details, things like revenue splits, are the things that are going to be decided. I thought the caller's regional question is an interesting one. That idea keeps on being floated. If you recall,
those fans go to the games too.
They do, and if you recall, the last time that President Mark Lamping went around kind of doing a pitch, his very first meeting was in Nocatee, was in St. Johns County, which raised some eyebrows because I'm pretty sure that everybody in St. Johns County would think it's a wonderful idea that Duval County pays for a new stadium. There's no carrot at all that I can imagine that would get, the hotels and tourism areas of St. John's and Nassau County to pay for this. There's probably a good argument that they should, but I don't know how you can make that happen.
That's where other ideas come in, like the ticket tax,
a bread box,
buying seats, selling shares. Yeah. All right. Glenn at the beaches.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for taking my call, Melissa. I just wanted to comment on having grown up in Jacksonville in the 60s and early 70s and left as soon as I got old enough because of the culture here, and then returning in 1990 because of the changes that were beginning, and then in come the Jaguars and the exposure and the money. The value of the marketing, the value of the culture that they have helped with the exposure of bringing to our city is you can't count the dollars for it, number one. Number two, we know from past experience that if we don't give them what they want in general, they will leave because there's only 32 of these football teams. And if this football team leaves our city, it will be a cultural backlash that we can't get over for 30 years. It's super important for our kids and our culture in this city. Just since they became a football team, Melissa, we've had a black mayor, a black sheriff, a female mayor. There is definite connection between that exposure and the outside money that it brought to our town and the changes here in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Glenn. Speaking as someone who grew up in Ohio, I can tell you that the psychic blow to Cleveland when the Browns snuck out of that town in the middle of the night was really bad. Now, all of that said, economists will tell you over and over again that NFL teams do not provide a net economic benefit to cities. Ben, that caller is talking about the marketing and the halo effect of the team in terms of how it's put Jacksonville on the map for tourism, for earned media. There are a lot of intangible benefits that you can point to that economists might not necessarily put on a line item.
Well, they're intangibles, but at the end of the day, we are about line items, right? And you need to be able to quantify things. And if it doesn't show up as something that's quantified, then does it really count, right? And end of the day, you have to show, where's the beef? And if it's not there, then it's not there. And it's all well and good. And don't get me wrong, having a football team is wonderful. It makes people happy. Look, Melissa, I'm from Baltimore. You talk about teams sneaking out in the middle of the night. It was the Colts that snuck out in the middle of the night and made Mayor Schaefer cry on national TV. And then we had 12 long years of nuclear winters before we had to, unfortunately, steal the Browns from Cleveland and bring them to Baltimore.
Yeah, you did steal them. You did steal them.
That's
just
right.
saying.
But we had to do what we have to do. Baltimore is how we roll. And listen, we got screwed over by the NFL. They came to Jacksonville instead of coming to Baltimore, among other places. And, there was Colts fever here years ago when Robert Irsay was shopping the team around and had that big event, the Gator Bowl, of 50,000 people. He was shopping us around like some sort of consignment store. And eventually...
Not that you're bitter about that or by any means.
Absolutely not. So I know what it's like to have a gut punch and a knife stab in your back when a team leaves town. Now, with that being said, you do, at the end of the day, everyone wants to have a team, and make no mistake about it, but you have to cut the best deal possible. You can't roll over and give away the store. And ultimately, that's what the Deacon administration is going to have to figure out. And one of the other point I like to make is the Jags are going to point to jobs that are created. The jobs will be created are temporary construction jobs to build a stadium, and the long-term jobs are going to be seasonal, low-paying jobs for the stadium. Those are mostly the kind of jobs that get built or developed from these type of stadium projects. Anything beyond that, you can't count player salaries or executive salaries or team salaries towards that. Those aren't really not a fair incubator of information to be able to have to include that into the so-called economic impact, because economic impact doesn't exist. Revenue is what exists. They're two separate things. So these will be a lot of things to bake into the pie for the Deacon administration when they take over July 1.
All great points from all of you. Here's a comment on Facebook. Perry says, our priorities are upside down when cities can afford to shell out $2 billion for a building, yet won't open the coffers for public education, crime reduction, poverty, or fulfilling the decades-long promises of consolidation. All right, I know we could keep talking about this, but there's a lot of other news we need to get to. If you're just tuning in, it's our Friday Roundtable. The number to join us, 549-2937. Another big story from the week, we got new information yesterday about the death of a Jacksonville man. 54-year-old Dexter Berry was taken to the Duval County Jail a few months ago on a misdemeanor charge. New information shows that life-saving medication was ordered for him to the jail, but it was never delivered. Berry subsequently died. This story, first reported by the Tributary, has sparked questions about health care overseen by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office at the jail. Now, local attorney Andrew Bonderud represents Berry's family. He questions the process that made Armor Correctional Health Services the health provider for the jail after they had just been criminally prosecuted in Wisconsin for the death of an inmate there.
And on the heels of that, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office awarded this company a $98 million no-bid contract. No bid, no competition whatsoever, because it was exempt under the municipal code here.
Bonderud did not stop there. According to him, former Jaguars star and NFL Hall of Famer Tony Baselli was listed as a lobbyist for Armor at the time the contractor was hired by the city under that no-bid deal. Bonderud went on to say on this program that incoming Jacksonville City Council President Ron Salem served as the consulting pharmacist on how meds were administered at the jail. WJCT News is working to verify those claims. We have reached out to both Mr. Baselli and Mr. Salem. No comment yet, but as we talk about this, we want your calls at 549-2937. Will Brown, your thoughts?
You know, before we even got on the air today, I went and read the Fifth Amendment. The amendment in our Constitution, which some believe more than others, describes specifically that no one shall, quote, be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, close quote. Threatening to beat up a neighbor should not be a reason why you die, directly or indirectly. Dexter Berry, he was charged with a misdemeanor, so it's absolutely wild to me that someone may not receive their medication while in custody. And I probably shouldn't say this on air, but I will. I have a family member right now who is in the jail, and that family member has health concerns. And so I can only imagine what other members of my family are thinking if they were to read this story. And so I mention that because the sheriff's office and our corrections folks have questions to answer so that people can believe with 100% clarity that they are taking care of the people in their custody. And so that is the biggest question. It might not necessarily be about Dexter Berry himself, which it is a tragedy when anyone dies, but especially in a case like this. But going forward, are they going to answer questions so that the public has trust that people are being taken care of and their Fifth Amendment rights, indirectly or directly, are not being violated?
It's 549-2937. Sheriff T.K. Waters told our news partner, News4Jax Channel 4, that he was not aware of the prosecutions of this vendor, Armor Correctional Health Services. JSO is now investigating. Alexandria Mansfield, at the same time, the municipal code apparently allows this kind of no-bid contract for a vendor like Armor, which, if you believe the prosecutions in other states, has questions attached to the quality of care it delivers.
Yeah, so I know that Nicole and the Tributary are both looking into their involvement, as you are, with Armor and Diamond Pharmaceutical, but I don't know much beyond that. I'm just as anxious as other readers to see what's going on there, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the contract now.
Here's a comment on Facebook from a listener. He says, the Dexter Berry case begs comparison with that of Keegan Roberts. In the Roberts example, a man was shot and killed by his neighbor after a long period of harassment by that neighbor. Afterwards, that neighbor was not even arrested. Dexter Berry merely threatened to beat up a neighbor and was arrested, denied life-sustaining medication, and subsequently died. In both cases, the dead men are black. This says bad things about criminal justice in Jacksonville. Ben Becker, there's still much to be learned about this, but the attorney for Barry's family did say on this program yesterday that he believed the arrest was improper, that Barry should not have been brought downtown necessarily for merely having a verbal altercation with a neighbor.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack here, and it's, there's still an investigation to be had. It's troubling. We talk about that this was a no bid contract, but that was allowed, and I'm sure that will be emphasized going forward. And it all comes as now we know that the sheriff's office is seeking a $35 million increase in its budget for next year, which the Deegan administration is going to have to kind of go through. Also asking for 80 more officers. So once again, JSO asking for more, and when you ask for more, you also should be providing more. And the expectations are that people are safe at the jail when they're in their care. And these are some of the questions that they're going to have to answer to.
Tim Gibbons.
That is the big question. I mean, there's in these criminal justice sort of things, sometimes I think people split on political lines of, more law and order, toss them up, lock them up and toss away the key. But the idea that if we as a community are saying these are people who have to be off the street, we as a community are taking on the responsibility of their health and safety while they are in the criminal justice system. And the reporting that basically says they knew he needed his medication and did not give it to him is damning. I mean, it's not something that you would not expect them to do. I mean, you have an inmate who comes in who needs medication. He's reportedly not the only inmate who has not gotten the medication they need, and that's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the records show well that there was an attempt made to order the medication for him. A nurse at the jail tried to get the medication for him, but it was not delivered in time. He was released after 2 days without his meds and repeatedly told the jail officials he could not even go 1 day without them. It's medication all heart transplant patients need to stay alive, and he died 3 days later. So the city is clearly looking at a major lawsuit over this.
They are, and I went and looked up the corrections budget that this current fiscal year. I mean, there's almost $150 million of local tax dollars that are going either directly or indirectly to corrections. And with that kind of money being spent, the public has a right to have our questions answered, whether the public as journalists or the public as people. Again, I'm, looking at the 848 employees within JSO's correction, 25.07 million in operating expenses, 17.9 million in health services. That was part of this current fiscal year budget, and then another 107.99 million in personnel, whether at the jail, the prison, or through programming. That's a lot of our money. And, I remember when Sheriff Waters was candidate Waters, and I asked him specifically, they're activists who are specifically calling out whether JSO needs to have increased funding this fiscal year. And this was back in August, heading into the current fiscal year that we're in now. And candidate Waters mentioned that this was going to pay raises and cost of living increases, and just making sure they kept up with the times. Well, keeping up with the times also means being in communication with the community when the community has questions.
Let's talk about some other stories from the week. The number to join us is 549-2937. Donate or discard. Duval County Public Schools says they still aren't sure what to do about a bunch of books that have been pulled off library and classroom shelves over content. And some librarians and teachers tell RJAX Today they haven't gotten any guidance really about whether to donate or toss unapproved books. All of this as districts around the state wrestle with how to implement Florida's controversial new rules, making it easier for the public to contest books and content. Now, the schools say they've sent about 60 tons of library books to a paper recycling center in Georgia since Florida passed its new book review law last year. That's twice as much as they sent last year. However, they point out many of the discarded books were old or outdated. But some teachers tell JAX Today they're worried this process is being used to quietly trash books that feature diverse stories or controversial themes. 549-2937. Tim, you wanted to say something.
I think the classical way of dealing with books like that is to burn them. So
we haven't seen that yet.
Not yet. But I think this is of a piece with some of the other issues coming out of Tallahassee. You see it with the DEI issues in higher ed, where big flashy law changes are made and the details are kind of just waved aside, leaving the people who have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis not being entirely sure how they're supposed to handle things. Last week we was talking to some higher ed, to UNF and other educators around the state, and they have the same issue of you passed a law, but nobody's telling us how to do this. Nobody's telling us exactly what we're supposed to do, and that's an issue.
Ben Becker, there are no shortage of people lining up to take books removed from school shelves. 90 Forward is putting up a bunch of those little free libraries around town with some of these books. But the fact that so many of these books are in limbo, I think, is what is upsetting for so many right now.
Well, certainly so. But if people are looking for places to donate books, I mean, there are opportunities. Self-plug here. Tanika Hughes has Tanika's Books for Kids at Action News Shacks. She does a drive every year, and she takes thousands of books. So if anyone's listening, or the school district is listening, you could send them to Tanika's Books for Kids. I can give you her cell phone number. Even. She'd be more than happy to take them.
Yeah. Now, a statewide teachers union has filed a legal challenge to overturn the Florida Department of Education's rule applying Florida's book review laws to classroom libraries. And there have been other lawsuits. Alexandria Mansfield.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what exactly the protocol typically is for retiring books, so to say, if they're, out of shape or falling apart or anything like that. I am assuming that sending it to a recycling center is meant to prevent it from going to landfills, which would be a good thing. But obviously, without knowing what books are being, quote, retired or, sent, it's very concerning that there's a lack of transparency here.
Okay, folks, a few more minutes and we want to talk about another big story, actually a series of stories you've been reporting on, Alex. The number to join us, 549-2937. In case you've been living under a rock around town, you've probably noticed that there is a lot of construction going on, right? Well, the Times-Union reports that several local landmarks are being torn down to make way for all of these new apartment buildings. At the same time, construction delays continue around the area because there aren't enough workers available to do this kind of work. So, Alexandria Mansfield, let's begin with you. Let's talk about the apartment boom and the landmarks that you've found that are being destroyed to make way for the apartments. What'd you turn up?
Yeah, so there are obviously a lot of landmarks that have been raised in the last couple of years, including the Old Times Union Building, River City Brewing, all sorts of stuff that has been a pretty important part of the Jacksonville skyline. And obviously, I've also been reporting a lot on an affordable housing crisis that we're having and how we just lack enough housing for our population growth in general. So I think there is a need for housing. Like, I don't think anybody can dispute that. It's just about how we're deciding where developments are going that I think is a little bit more controversial, and especially with these landmarks going down, I think is concerning to people who have been in Jacksonville for a long time and want to see those landmarks still.
I know one of them, I think, was the Morocco Shrine, and there were some others that you listed in your article. What were some of the other ones?
Oh gosh, I wrote this article a while ago. I'm trying to remember.
Oh, no problem. But it's indicative of the need for housing. But at the same time, you also have reported that schools for trades across the region are seeing record high enrollment numbers because there aren't enough workers to put up all this new construction. Tell us more about that too.
Yeah, so I liken this to another shortage that we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, I believe maybe in late 2020 to early 2021, where we were having some major supply chain issues that were causing construction to halt because builders couldn't get the materials they needed to continue. Even appliances like fridges and ovens were hard to get and were causing new construction houses to be completed much later, months later than their expected dates, which was also causing a housing shortage. So it's like this huge snowball effect, and we're kind of seeing it in a similar way now, but instead of materials being in shortage, we're having a shortage of people who are qualified to do the work on these homes. And it's definitely going to continue to impact construction and unfortunately impact the housing crisis that we're having. But at the same time, as you mentioned, many of the leaders in the apprenticeship programs I spoke with were saying that this has been a record year for enrollment and for applications. And they're hoping to continue seeing that for the foreseeable future in the next couple classes of apprenticeships. So there is some hopeful news that this will end.
All right. Here's a tweet from a listener. There are too many apartments and not enough seats in the public schools and teachers to serve them. These apartments are an eyesore and they're overpriced. Tim.
Well, the rents in Jacksonville have been going up, but we are still below the national median. We were one of the fastest rental increases across the country, 4 or 5, I think. But again, still below the average. To go to Alexandria's point on the labor shortage, that's expected to be exacerbated once the new law goes into effect at the beginning of July. That will take more draconian measures against undocumented immigrants, but it's having a ripple effect even among documented ones, where workers from other states are saying, we don't want to come to Florida. We just don't want to be hassled. And talked to construction executives last week who they're worried. They're worried that, the day last Thursday when workers walked off job sites, they're afraid that you can't get roofers, you can't get landscapers. All of these experienced people who can go to Georgia, can go to North Carolina, and can do projects there will make it even worse here.
The consequences of that harsh anti-immigration law.
So the construction industry in Florida is, both building all those apartments. The housing boom has slowed. The number of permits dropped year over year. But you also have, hurricane repairs. You have road construction. We talk about the state booming. That means a lot of things need to be built, and we just don't have the workforce to do it.
Will Brown, this proves once again that there are certain jobs that are very difficult to fill without an influx of immigrant labor. And we are seeing that play out in real time right now in Florida.
This is what happens when we don't appreciate the people who do the so-called dirty jobs. I mean, to me, that's the simplest way of putting it. And I'm not saying these jobs are dirty in any way, shape, or form. But what I'm saying is that there are a number of people who are underappreciated, and with other states with other Sunbelt states, as Tim mentioned, growing, maybe not as fast as Florida, people have options, and when people have options, sometimes a place or an industry gets left out, and hopefully that's not Florida, but that is, according to some fantastic reporting Tim and Nick Blank did this week in the Business Journal, that's looking like that may be the case.
Ben Becker.
Well, listen, I'm not a real estate expert, but I will say it would appear to be that people want to come here and we want to build. I mean, and there's not enough workers. In some respect, it's a good problem to have. I'd rather have that problem than the other way around. The unintended consequence, though, of the new law going into effect, of course, is fewer workers to build stuff, which that means if you have to figure out ways to get these people, that increases construction costs. Construction costs are already increasing anyway. Borrowing costs are already sky high because of interest rates. And then, of course, that creates an affordability issue, which we all know about. So where all this ends, listen, I don't know. That's the honest answer.
Thanks for that. Okay, folks, there's a lot of news that happened this week. So before we say goodbye, we've got a little extra time to go around the horn and ask our fabulous foursome what other stories caught their attention this week. Yes, time for the lightning round. And let's begin with Will. Will Brown, what's happening in your world?
You know, there's a big story out of South Florida this week, something I never thought I would see, a global news event that is having everyone talking. Oh, it's Lionel Messi signing with Inter Miami.
Now, for people that don't follow soccer, tell us why this is an earth-shaking event.
So Lionel Messi is, at worst, one of the three best players to have ever played soccer. Soccer is the global game. When he helped Argentina win the World Cup in December, more than 1 billion people watched. So he is fantastically talented, dribbler, scorer, passer, literally can do anything. And he is signing with Inter Miami, who is, frankly, the worst team in all of the Major League Soccer's Eastern Conference right now.
So is it like when AFC Richmond got Zava on Ted Lasso? That's my frame of reference here.
It's about like 50 times bigger than that.
Okay.
I think the only thing that can be compared is from the time a week ago, Inter Miami had a much smaller social media footprint than the Jaguars. Since Wednesday when Messi signed, they have overtaken the Jaguars in total social media followers. I mean, this is like LeBron James is superstar. LeBron James, Tom Brady, and Aaron Judge's superstardom, and then metastasize that by about 10 or 15 times. You maybe get a touch of how big of a name and how big of a presence Lionel Messi is in global soccer.
Well, I know who's going to be flying to Miami more frequently.
Me.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that. That's Will Brown. Alex Mansfield, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so as a millennial, this was a really important statistic that came up for me this week. The majority of millennials are now homeowners, with 52% owning property now. So that's a huge milestone that took millennials a little bit longer to reach than previous generations. And in Duval County, it's even higher. It's 58% homeownership. So good news for millennials.
That's great news. Tim Gibbons.
And bad news for avocado toast sales, I assume, because that was the reason. The Live Golf PGA Tour merger.
Yes.
Fascinating on anybody who follows golf at all, but also remember the PGA Tour is based in Ponte Vedra Beach, and the outcry, the follow-on stories of that. It's going to be interesting to follow how all of that plays out.
Yeah, certainly quite controversial to say the least.
A little bit.
Ben Becker.
To combine the Live Golf and the Messi news, Messi turned down about $1.5 billion with a B over 3 years from a team in Saudi Arabia to play soccer for them. So if that money, he could have paid for the Jags' new stadium.
Why didn't someone think of that? That would have solved all of our problems. All right, I've got one too. Did you notice that Jacksonville unveiled its bicentennial bell, celebrating the city's bicentennial? This bad boy weighs in at 225 pounds and had its debut Wednesday during Art Walk. It's a year and a half in the making and a permanent reminder of Jacksonville's history. It will remain on display in the main library for now until the Historical Society figures out where it will be displayed permanently. So you can go check that out at the main library. Kind of cool. And today at noon, please join myself and co-host Danny Rivero for the Florida Roundup as we take a closer look at the governor sending more migrant flights to other states. Thank you so much, to all of you for appearing today. Will Brown, Alex Mansfield, Ben Becker, and Tim Gibbons. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. A quick break, and up next, the latest on Downtown Vision's efforts to increase placemaking around town. We'll tell you why that matters after this. We'll be right back.
This week on Science Friday, the mysterious and fascinating world of owls.
They're ferocious and also they're sort of soft and tender. This owl was incredibly cute, but also like a brutal killer.
Why owls are such skilled predators, including how they barely make any sound when in flight. All on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3 here on WJCT News 89.9.
The 2024 GOP ticket added more names this week and a big rebuke from a former Trump ally.
I believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States.
Also, intense smoke from wildfires burning in several Canadian provinces blankets the northeastern United States. And who wins in the PGA LIV merger? More on the roundup next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the first of several new placemaking Jacks projects are coming to life this week. What's this all about? With more, we welcome Katie Yellow, Senior Director of Creative Placemaking and Events for the Downtown Vision, Inc. Good to see you.
Good morning, Melissa. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. First off, what is placemaking?
Yeah, so I'm happy to succinctly describe that for our audience. It's a process. It's a process where we capitalize on a community's assets, a very local community's assets, and the whole intention and point of the process is to create great public spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what's a good example of a placemaking space that we already know well in Jacksonville?
Yeah, excuse me. We have incredible examples locally. I think one that's talked about nationally is the Riverside Arts Market that pops up every Saturday. It takes an underutilized parking lot and totally transforms it into a vital economic space. And then today we're seeing incredible investment in our parks, the actual making of great places, Lift Every Voice and Sing Park, and those coming along the riverfront.
Okay, so with all of that said, you've got some unique year one activations. Save the dates are out for 4 projects. Tell us about these projects.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we're really excited. We went through a highly participatory process to allocate the funding. Like I said, placemaking is about capitalizing on a local community's assets. And the way that we identify those is we, we look to the residents and what their talents are and what their interests are in placemaking. And then we give them the tools and resources they need to implement projects. Those resources are funding and then technical expertise, which I bring to the table. So out of that process, we have 4 projects that have gone live: the Little Alley Shows, Love Fest, Go Skate Day, and The Petite, with a pop-up kind of element to them and a catalytic kind of flavor to them. So the first is Little Alley Shows. That project team is Emily Moody and her staff and neighboring colleagues. They took the alley behind Wolf and Cub and totally transformed it. So before you'd walk by, you wouldn't typically notice it, but if you did, it just kind of was a dead zone, lots of garbage around, really ugly and definitely uninspiring. They took the funding, they deep cleaned it, picked up every little cigarette butt, re-rocked it, re-landscaped it. And if you peek in there now, it's a really magical little social gathering space, which adds very much to the rich social life of downtown. It's soft open Wednesday, hard opened last night with its first concert, littlealleyshows.com. You can reserve a spot.
Nice.
They're selling out fast. It's a very intimate seating arrangement. There's only 40 seats. So you have to arrange, but it's certainly worth stopping by and just experiencing celebrating with that team. Another really exciting project is Love Fest. That's happening next Friday on the 16th. We have a very famous program at DVI, the Sip and Stroll style activation, where we take the riverfront and we kind of activate it with a footpath, food, music, and things for families to do. So Love Culture is a local hip hop collective. We saw them on the stage at Jack's River Jams. I know I'm new to Jacksonville, but I know that we've kind of grown up with the band over the past 5 or 6 years, and they're now curating a whole festival with the energy of community and love and connectivity. So from Haskell down to the new FIS building, you'll see that riverfront fully activated. We'll have bars,
This
music.
is on the 16th.
On the 16th, yeah, from 5 to 9 p.m. We're going to pull up the water taxi so you can enjoy an adult beverage on it and be educated about the river. We have a vendor village popping up at the base of the sculpture behind the Y. We're going to open the playground right there so it's publicly accessible from the Riverwalk so families can come and enjoy. And then there'll be DJs and sets by Ebonique and Juan, as well as Love Culture headlining that festival. So I encourage everyone to come down and just on Friday night and see the river, and this beautiful asset that we have. The following weekend on the 24th is Go Skate Day. So we have an incredibly rich history in the skating community here. As you know, the global championship has come back twice, which is unusual in Jacksonville.
We've got the nation's oldest
We've got
skate
the
park.
nation's oldest skate park, and we're building a new kind of art skate park, if you will, across from Ram. But the project team from that who won the project is the Block Supply Skate Company out of Springfield, and they're going to take the historic Mount Zion ZME parking lot on Beaver Street at 201 East Beaver Street and totally transform it into kind of a pop-up skate park with incredible healthy activities for kids and families.
That sounds really fun.
That's incredible. That's the 24th, and that celebrates Go Skate Day. So the nation and the world are like, everyone get out and skate. And that's for all types of people, all ages. And you don't have to have experience to pop up.
Okay, so that's the 24th. Last but not least, later this summer, you've got the Petite Series.
Yes. So there is a new privately owned public space that's been built out next to the Federal in between Sweet Pete's on Hogan Street. The project lead is Candace Nicole Clark. She's an incredible curator, model, mother, amongst many other creative titles. And she's totally transforming the block. So she's addressing a need for local creatives just to have spaces to show art and gather around it. We lack gallery spaces. We lack artist studios. We lack spaces for artists to come together. So she's taking a vacant storefront, popping up a gallery show, activating the outdoor courtyard, and bringing attention to the businesses right there, including the new 22 units behind it, the newly transformed Federal. And then, of course, we're partnering with Sweet Pete's to provide sweet treats and make it a really great and immersive experience.
So where can people go to learn more about placemaking, Jax?
Yep, so the full lineup and all of the details of the project teams are at dtjax.com/placemakingjax. And everything's there from how we got through this process, really how we define that term, my unique practice in this field and how I approach placemaking, because there's many different types and ways to do this, and I bring a unique flavor to Jacksonville. And you can learn about the project teams there because they're working really hard to curate and put together these events.
Check it out. And thank you, Katie. Katie Yellow, Senior Director of Creative Placemaking and Events
Thanks
for
so much.
Downtown Visioning. Thanks. And thanks for listening, everyone. Make it a great Friday wherever your place is. And thanks for being with our team. We'll catch you again at 9 a.m. Monday, and have a great weekend.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.